The tale I am about to relate is as old as the world itself. It is a tale of hatred, the kind that stems from fear, which in turn takes root from ignorance and foolishness. But it is also the tale of Victor, who recently moved into a charming little country home so as to flee the insanity of big city life. However, this does not take into account the chauvinistic tendencies of the locals, who do not perceive his arrival as a favorable omen. But for the time being, Victor knows nothing, and what he doesn't know cannot hurt him. Yet. The next morning, while stepping out for a breath of air, Victor attempts to make an initial contact with one of his neighbors. Imagine his surprise as he watched the former return to his cottage without even having the basic courtesy to return his salutations. An isolated case, presumes Victor, who immediately attempts to greet his other neighbor. But once again, he is met with the same reaction of mistrust. His heart filled with bitterness, Victor returns to his home, cursing the close-mindedness of the country folk. Having quickly gotten over that incident, Victor takes advantage of his morning stroll to visit the village. But he rapidly finds himself on the receiving end of the local tittle-tattle, generally reserved for strangers from the city. Initially surprised to find that his dog had disappeared a few days later, Victor wonders how he could have freed himself without assistance when suddenly, from over his neighbor's hedge, the distinct resonance of a party kindles his curiosity. And there, before his eyes, roasting on a spit, rotates the carcass of an animal corresponding exactly to the build of his trusted companion. Victor needn't see any more to fill in the gruesome blanks of the story. Unfortunately too focused on thinking up the worst possible scenarios, his presence is noticed by his neighbor's little girl. Since suspicion is contagious, Victor equips himself with a home security system and a generator, convinced that isolation from the others is a necessity. At nightfall, not too far from there, a desperate villager searches for his son. Disheartened, he approaches his closest neighbor to ask for advice. Despite not actually having seen the boy, the neighbor mentions how the stranger locked himself up into his home after being caught spying. Having agreed on the venture, the two decide to investigate for themselves. But the instant they are detected by the security system, they flee the scene, henceforth convinced that the stranger is plotting a dreadful scheme, perhaps even being the one responsible for the disappearance of the boy. The next few days are steadily punctuated with the repeated ringing of the security system's alarm, the frequency of which increases all the time. Evidently, the system is no longer adequate enough to keep the villagers from snooping around Victor's home. Panicked, he sees no other alternative than to elaborate a plan to guarantee his protection. Proving destiny is indeed a cruel mistress. A chance electrical blackout plunges the entire village into complete darkness. Darkness which the villagers immediately blame the stranger for, assuming a new ordeal he was putting the young boy through required all the electrical power of the area. Inspired by an energy which, in completely different conditions, would have allowed them to create extraordinary things, they convinced themselves to torch the ogre's home. If only Victor had been an actual ogre and not a brilliant inventor, the villagers would not be confronted with what he had in store for them. All their hatred towards him pent up in 40 tons of rampaging metallic fury. Unfortunately, if vengeance is a false god, it indeed guides man into blindness, losing sight of what is truly essential. The next morning, an electrician repairing a problem on a major conduit that caused a significant blackout the night before reported seeing a small boy and a dog merrily skipping out of a nearby forest. When interrogated, the poor child could bring no further explanation concerning the bizarre devastation of the village of Paranoland.